Work shouldn't feel like a drag, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice your soul for a job you love. Determined to rethink the future of work, she's out of her depth on purpose. With fresh ideas, interviews, and stories from her life on the road, meet Europe's newest digital nomad, Blair Palmer.
Hello and welcome to A Brilliant Gamble, episode 90. I hope you are really well. 6 months ago, almost to the day, we set off on our big trip. Can't believe it, 6 months. And in about 3 weeks, that trip comes to an end. Our intention was to shed the constraints of everyday life by selling our house and buying a camper van and living on the road in Airbnbs and in the van all around Europe to see what we really valued and, of course, to see what lay beyond our backyard. I learnt that you take yourself with you and that any work you need to do on yourself will follow you around wherever you go. And it did. It followed me to Italy, Croatia, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Slovenia, and much of the UK. We had our minds blown by the Alps and Snowdonia. We felt the spirit of the Romans in the Colosseum. We ate cheese, a lot of cheese, and marvelled at the Eiffel Tower in France. We got bitten by mosquitoes pretty much everywhere we went, and we were hosted by a whole range of wonderful and sometimes weird Airbnb owners, all trying to live their own dreams. When we return from Ireland, which is our final destination, we'll be moving into our new home, a 2.5 acre smallholding in Somerset. For those of you who've been following this podcast for a long time, this won't be a surprise. I've been talking about this for a long time, but I couldn't work out how to make it happen. Our trip showed me that money isn't as much of a barrier to doing stuff, to living your dreams than we think, and that time is a state of mind. So we are embarking on our next brilliant gamble. A small holding where we hope to live lighter on the planet, be closer to nature, grow more of our own food and raise our own animals. I am, of course, very curious to see whether the lessons I've learned over this last 6 months stick. We shall see. But for now, my primary concerns are practical. It's to do with fencing and overgrown fields and getting hold of a juicer quick smart so we can do something with all the apples in the orchard as soon as possible. And it was with this in mind that I asked our host in our lovely Airbnb near Glastonbury this week to be my guest on the show. She runs a small holding of a similar scale and has made a great success out of it. Libby Syddall left her job in social services 4 years ago to grow her small holding from a small chicken business to a variety of different activities today: sheep, pigs, and more chickens, plus a lot of experimentation in between. We sat together in her living room and talked about her journey and what I should keep in mind as we embark on our next brilliant gamble. If living off the land has been a dream of yours, you'll love this conversation. We really get into the nitty-gritty, and whatever brilliant gambles you're embarking on or already undertaking, you'll enjoy Libby's down-to-earth, realistic, and yet light-hearted attitude. Let's go to the show. Libby, I'm so pleased that you've agreed to talk to me today because I know that you're quite busy as a person.
Well, I'm honoured to be asked, so thank you very much, Blair. Yeah, no, busy, but not too busy to share my experience with other people. So
brilliant. Well, look, let's go back because you have a small holding now, and that's really what I want to talk to you about because obviously we're about to embark on our small holding adventure, and I just need as much help as I can get. But you haven't always done this.
That's right.
You had a proper job before.
I did. So straight out from sort of university, worked for Clark's, doing project management, which I really enjoyed. Then very soon after had my first son, and then really sort of embarked on a journey of working with young people and very much a sort of social services sort of feel to it. So looking after children who've been in foster care, children who were at risk of being in foster care, and then working with children in care. And so really it was probably the first, I don't know, maybe 15 years of my working life was spent doing that. and then kind of had a bit of a burnout after working in a children's residential home for quite a while, and then decided that I'd work with adults with learning disabilities, and then found out that in fact baby number 4 was on the way. So that was my kind of moment where everything changed, I think.
Yeah. And that kind of work, I mean, it must be very rewarding, but also, as you say, the toll on you personally must have been quite great.
Yes, I mean, by which point I had 3 children myself, and when you're working in a children's unit, it's a very bizarre dynamic in that you're kind of parents with 2 other people you're almost kind of co-parenting with on that shift, and you love and care for the children as much as you do your own, but yet you're not starting with the same place that you started with your own children. These children have been hardwired through the experiences they've had to make some interesting choices and have some interesting behaviours and things, and that can make things very difficult. And it's very difficult when you put so much in, and it can feel that you're not making much progress. But I always used to hold on to the idea that maybe in 10 years' time something I'd said or something I did with them would resonate, and they'd kind of go, oh, I get it now. And that's what you hold on to. But yeah, I think after a couple of years of that, it was time for a change.
Yeah. So you already had at that point some chickens.
That's right. Yeah.
Was it that made you think, well, maybe we could expand this?
So we had chickens. So we've lived in this house. So we live in a village in Somerset. We used to live in Glastonbury, which very much in the town. We wanted to move more out to the countryside. It was quite a lively road we lived in. There was always plenty going on. We had 3 growing children. We needed a bigger house, so we decided to move out to the countryside. Decided to do that sort of very Hugh Fanning Whittingstall thing, get some hens. Which we really loved, and I've always had quite a business mind and realised there was a lot of people looking for hens. We knew somewhere really great to get them who actually was rubbish at advertising, so kind of saw a business opportunity there really. We ran it very much as a hobby for a really long time. We've been going 10 years now, but for the first probably 6 years it was just a very sort of part-time thing, and I suppose from that maybe the idea of the smallholding grew, I think.
So what was the moment where you thought, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to start this thing properly, the smallholding?
Okay, well, so baby number 4 was on the way. She was a bit of a surprise.
But she's lovely. She's so gorgeous.
She is gorgeous. But yeah, and I have to say, I was quite reticent about being pregnant for a 4th time. It certainly wasn't planned. And I was at a stage where my youngest of my first 3 was going off to secondary school, and freedom was sort of within touching distance really, and I felt kind of cross, I'll be honest, that actually I was kind of being plunged back into the land of nappies and toddler groups. But I suppose, when life gives you lemons and all that. So very soon actually the idea grew on me that obviously this new little life was on its way, and my mum had helped a lot with childcare with our first 2 children. Her life was changing and she wasn't going to be around so much to support us. I also worked in a very physically demanding job, and I think when I got to 5 months pregnant, I just thought, this is it, I just can't do this anymore. It's just too much for everybody, me physically, me emotionally, as well as the children really. It was, affecting my mum, and that's when I decided that I was going to stop working for Somerset County Council and really sort of embrace the chicken business and grow a smallholding, and that's what we did, and never looked back. So we're 4.5 years down the line now, and I've never regretted it.
That's amazing. So, just try to think of myself 4.5 years down the line of hours and how different things are going to be to the way things are now. So, you currently you've got the chickens, and you can talk a bit about actually what the hen business is, because there's eggs, but there's the other part, isn't there?
Yeah, so the main thing we do is actually we sell hens to people who have hens in their gardens. So, and probably the average amount of hens people buy is about 4, so generally people keep 4 to 6 hens. We have some people who buy 50, some people who have 2, and we give a lot of support to those people. So quite often they're quite nervous, they have lots of questions, Vets are not always brilliant at supporting people in those situations, so it's something we sort of specialise in, and the business has really taken off. It's just been so fantastic. We do lots of shows, and it's lovely because lots of existing customers come and see us and tell us how great their experiences have been. We get so much repeat custom, and I think we should be on about 3,000 birds this year, and we're looking to do 4,000 next year, so it's growing almost exponentially, really.
It's amazing. And they're pretty fancy, your chickens.
Some of them. So yeah, the core of what we sell is the large hybrids, which so they're real kind of solid laying birds. Everything from the typical red hen through to different colours. But yeah, they're hardcore laying hens, and then we do some really kind of weird and wonderful things, which has been quite a new thing this year. We've played with it a bit over the years. Never really managed to get the formula quite right. Always gone back to the large hybrids, but I think now we've made that breakthrough, and I just can't believe the market, particularly for the fancy stuff. It's, having had years and years of selling, typical boring brown hens, who were lovely, by the way, and they're really friendly. But you've seen them all. To do the fancy stuff is quite fun. So.
Yeah. So you've got their hen business, which really, as you say, that's really growing, and there's a huge demand.
Very
for
much the core of our smallholding and the core of my income. Very much so.
Yeah. And then what about, you've also got quite a few sheep. What's the model with the sheep?
Okay, so the interesting thing with the sheep, it's sometimes when you have a small holding, you have an animal in mind and then you look for the land, and sometimes you come across the land and then think of the right animal to go on it. And we were in a situation where the person opposite has a beautiful home with 2 acres attached, and I watch the contractor come and mow the field every 6 weeks, which seems like an enormous waste. So I suggested to them that they might quite like us to have some sheep on the land. They actually agreed, which I was quite surprised about. The first year was a nightmare, so we decided that the best way ahead, which never do this people, is to do bottle-fed lambs. That was a big mistake, because actually what sheep need is mums going, get your head out of that and stop playing with that fox and all that kind of thing. So that was a nightmare. It also was fenced really badly, so the first year was a bit of a nightmare, but we went to the people who own the field, explained the situation. They were really keen to keep us there, and they were really enjoying kind of watching us do it all, really. So they very kindly said, well, we will pay for the fencing for the field if you guys get it put in. So we sort of shared the cost of that. And it really changed our experience of keeping sheep. So we kept sheep for 2 years, which was great. By this point, the chicken business was growing quite a lot, so we then had a year off. Had sheep again this year. Unfortunately, it was quite a tough year because we had a lot of rain at the beginning, then it's been really dry. So we've actually dramatically reduced the amount of sheep that we've been able to keep. Now going into the winter, we've run out of grazing, which is a shame, but obviously we've had the fruits of our labour, which we've just had lots of lamb back, which has been great.
Yeah, and I so when I rang on your doorbell yesterday, you told me that I was about the 20th person who'd been. So there's a lot of demand, is there, for locally grown lamb. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, we live in a very middle class village. The people really are quite aware, I think, of where their food comes from, are very much the sort of people who would shop in a farm shop, people who like to support local businesses as well. So it's just that sort of perfect dynamic, really, of what we need to be able to retail our meat. So the way it works with our sheep is that generally we sell the bulk for meat, and then we have a little bit left over for ourselves. And certainly the income we make from it is no great shakes, but it pays for the meat we have, pays for the costs of them all, and we have a little bit left over. But we enjoy doing it. So.
Yeah, I think that must be, when I've tried to do some very rough maths about how we might make money from ours, my big hope is that they'll pay for themselves. I mean, that's basically it. If they make any more money than that, then that's a bonus. But the financials seem... Well, of course, they seem tight. I mean, we know that because we know the farming industry struggles, and it must be much harder on a small scale. Tough.
It is and it isn't. I think when you are a commercial farmer, you have economies of scale. You have so much big machinery and things to help you. Obviously, vaccinations and all those sorts of things. It's the sort of cost per animal is much cheaper. But then you're generally selling at market, which you're not getting the best prices for. And certainly we found, being smallholders, that the best way of doing it is to sell direct to the consumer and cut out the middleman. Definitely.
Yeah. And what about the pigs? Now, when we first arrived, we met some pigs.
Yeah.
Are the pigs still there?
Yes, Snap, Crackle and Pop are still with us, but within hours, I'm afraid, they'll be making their final journey. Which, yeah, it's sad. But, you know, we knew when they came in the spring, we always have them from the spring to the autumn, that's what was going to happen. We tried overwintering pigs, it never really works brilliantly well. And they've had a really superb life, actually. I feel, you know, they've been able to, you know, run around. Really, they're quite big enclosure. It's huge, isn't it? Root around, exhibit all the normal behaviours like chewing all the trees and generally causing chaos. And yeah, it's getting time now.
How does it change your attitude towards the food that you eat, particularly the meat, the fact that you've known the animal? Because for me, so I grew up on a smallholding, and when I was about 14, I decided I'd had enough of eating them. And I had a conversation with my mum that said, look, I don't want to eat our animals anymore. I have bottle fed some of the lambs. I've gone out and collected the eggs in the morning. I've done, you know, all the stuff that you do with the animals I've been involved in, and they feel like pets to me. I don't want to eat them. And her response was, well, that's fine, but then I'm not going to buy supermarket meat for you. If you're not going to eat our animals, you're not going to eat any.
Yeah.
And so that's when I became a vegetarian.
Yeah.
Is there any of that for you? Because my parents had a different attitude, which was, we'll only eat our own meat and we'll enjoy it.
So probably one of the biggest influences on me deciding to have a small holding is that, in fact, all of my friends bar one is vegetarian. And I was finding it increasingly difficult, I suppose, to justify why I continue to eat meat. And so really that was why I wanted to have the small holding, because I thought it was the only way I absolutely know the life that those pigs have had, or those sheep have had. And I have to say, from a welfare point of view, I think pigs have a really rough deal in the commercial industry, in commercial farming generally. Sheep, not so much, but it's ridiculous that we're importing lamb from New Zealand. The quality of beef, we don't do beef, but we do buy locally reared beef that's reared in our village, and it is just a whole different ballgame to what you buy in the supermarket. And certainly I think the quality of the meat we produce is far superior to what we'd be able to buy. And just knowing the ethics of it all makes it so much easier for me to balance that sort of slight battle I have in my mind about eating meat. I have to say, I have come close to becoming vegetarian, because you do get very attached to your animals, and it's something I think you really need to consider, actually. But there is ways of doing small holding. So, for instance, buying weaners, so they come in the spring, they go in the autumn, or buying sheep, what are called store lambs, which you're sort of just rearing them on once they're quite a good size already to really, when they're ready to go off. Certainly I think that makes there a certain detachment. It's not like, you know, you've helped deliver them and, you know, you've helped rear them and bottle feed them and all those sorts of things. As you know, there is a certain special sheep who was bottle reared 2 years ago.
Oh, lovely George.
Who's still here. And yes, they do become pets. And when, you know, it's difficult to cross that line with some of them. Certainly I find taking any animal from alive to dead and being involved in the butchery very, very difficult, and I'm very grateful to be able to pass that on to somebody else to do.
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you think it's possible to, so our plan is to try to keep animals that you don't have to butcher in order to get some product out of them. So like the chickens, although obviously they do come to the end of their laying at a certain point. I think we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, definitely.
But, you know, for instance, alpacas, that it can be for the fibre and for the breeding. And our view, and, you know, people might think that this is hypocritical, but I don't have a problem with people eating meat. I just don't personally want to. So I don't have a problem with selling animals on that maybe are going to then be used for meat. I just don't want to do that myself.
I think it's a great attitude to have, actually, because I think we have to, as smallholders, whether you're vegetarian or not, once you're passing your animals on to other people, you no longer have a say in how they're kept. There was a farmer very recently who very famously decided not to send his beef animals to slaughter and sort of donated them to charity. Now, of course, there was a cost involved to him, but actually the ongoing cost of keeping those animals is £1 million. Now, he's not providing that, somebody else is. And there's some really interesting ethics involved, actually, once you get into that kind of thing. And I think once you sell your animals, you are no longer in a position to dictate how they are, how long they're alive for, or so on. And certainly within animal rescue centres, they are awash with kuni pigs, for instance, who owners have said, well, we don't want them eaten, but we don't want to care for them ourselves. And I personally have a bit of an issue with that.
Yeah. So we'll have to think really carefully about our animals, how we can, because the animals for me is such a big part of it.
Yeah.
I love growing the veg and the fruit and all of that, but actually
you can't
to have
a carrot.
No, you can't. It's so nice, isn't it, in the morning to go out and to see your animals and
Definitely.
to take care of them and do the work with them, do the jobs that they need. But then there just has got to be a financial, it has to make sense financially. Otherwise, you just have a very big group of pets.
Yes.
Very expensive pets.
Yeah. And people run their small holdings all in different ways. So there's some people who really, they have a blank check. Whatever the vet fees are, whatever the costs of the housing and the fencing are, nothing is too good, and they will pay whatever it takes to keep the animals in the way they want to. And if you're in a position to be able to do that, that's wonderful. I don't think that's the reality for most of us. Most smallholders I've met have the attitude that they would like the small holding to pay for itself, and I think that's a really healthy, sensible attitude to have. Some people do make an income from their small holdings, a considerable one. And actually, one of the knock-on effects of our small holding, which we hadn't considered originally, was that obviously from our holiday let, we're able to take people to visit the animals on small holding and to help people understand where meat comes from, how our animals are reared compared to maybe a more commercial enterprise. And that's been really powerful. So for actually that alone has made our small holding incredibly commercially viable. So.
Talk to me then about a typical day then. So because again, the other idea that we have about people that live on farms or smallholders is, it's a very early start. You have to get up and, start dealing with animals, and you're kind of busy on the small holding all day. What's a typical day like for you?
I think people do have that kind of attitude and feel that that's probably the reality. For myself, my husband works full-time, works incredibly long hours, and actually, as I'm very dedicated to my small holding, but I'm also very dedicated to my children, and actually the first thing in the morning, the needs of my children override the needs of my animals. So we have quite an early start, so we're generally up sort of 6:37. Everybody's dropped off at school for the bus or at school by 8, and then I get into doing my jobs then. What I tend to find is if I try and do anything earlier, then our youngest quite often also wakes up, and then she wants to come with me or she wants to hang around, and then there's no one awake to look after her. So just for me, I've found that's the formula that works best for us. Ideally, I suppose it would be great if I could see to all my animals earlier than that, but also my small holding isn't here on site at my actual house. It's from borrowed bits of land all over the village, and I have to get in the car and drive around and see to all of those. So you have to do what works for you.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think when people picture that lifestyle, they do picture it in the most idealised form. A house in the countryside surrounded by their own fields, and that's the picture, and that they will have all the time in the world to just get up and kind of potter about and do, they make them bread in the meantime, and so, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And actually, the reality is there are 4 children, and there's normal things to do in the house. I mean, one of the things I've learnt from our travels is even when you don't have a house, you still need to do laundry, and you still need to wash up, and it's all the kind of everyday thing. Go to the supermarket, it's all everyday things. So there's all of that as well, and then there's this land bit, and we we've been very fortunate to get something that's got the land with it. But when we wandered around your place a couple of weeks ago, I thought this would be fine. I thought this wouldn't work, but this would be fine to have it in different pockets if this is the only way we can make it happen.
And this, I think, was our frustration when originally we had the idea. I mean, I think we'd wanted a small holding for a long time. We kept thinking we would move and try and find something. The reality is, if you're buying a house with land attached, the value of that land is extortionate. It really is expensive, and sometimes to make your dream happen, you just have to come at it from a different angle. And so obviously we knew the people opposite had the land for the sheep. And in fact, that came on slightly later, because what we originally started with is some friends down the road who knew a lot of people in the village, particularly people who had little pockets of land. And actually, we originally were looking for a bit of an area for some quail, which obviously was an actual extension of the chicken business. And they said, oh, we've got some woodland, you can put some quail in. So we went to see the woods, and actually when we saw them, we realised it was never going to work with quail. But then I knew they had this bit of woodland spare, and so I was kind of, again, sort of thinking, actually, which animal would fit the space, as opposed to sort of trying to do it the other way around. And had the idea of pigs. Unbeknownst to me, the gentleman in the couple had always wanted pigs, and his wife said, over my dead body, you never have any pigs. So, I mean, he just thought his moment had come and was so excited, because he works abroad, so it's really difficult for him to do it. And it just worked perfectly, and we've had pigs there every year for 4 years now, and it's just been hugely popular. Not only with, we've loved it, they have loved it as well, but also there's a public footpath that goes past, so everybody makes a detour with the dogs to say hi to the pigs, which has been great, and consequently they're probably the most socialised pigs in all of Somerset, I think.
Yeah, no, I really like that. You know, I think we can get really limited by thinking it has to be a certain way, and in fact that's exactly where I thought I couldn't do this, because I thought, well, I can't afford one of those houses with that land. I run my own business. No one's going to give me a mortgage of that scale, and anyway, I don't want to have that kind of mortgage hanging over me, and then I wouldn't have the time to do the thing, because I'd be working so hard to make the money.
It's irony, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it just wasn't going to work. So I thought it wasn't an option, and then I realised, well, what if we rent? There just isn't the same outlay, there isn't the same complexity, and you're not looking at these kind of £500,000 houses starting point for anything with land. And so, you know, the house on the place that we're having is really small, and we've compromised on that as well. We've thought, what's more important? Is it the country living home, you know, that they can come and take photos, or is it a little house that's fine for me and the dogs and Ivy, but it's got the land?
Compromise. I think
Compromise
is the golden word.
Yeah.
And I think if you decide you're going to have this country living home with these beautiful acres and this lovely vista and all the rest of it, you may be waiting your entire life. And I don't know whether I was approaching the big 4-0, but I sort of had this kind of moment where I suppose I just thought, you know, what if you know, my card gets punched. I think when you're in your 20s and 30s, you think you'll live forever, and then you realise, actually, this is it, this is the moment. It's not when you'll retire, it's not when you're, you know, when you've done this or finished that. Sometimes you just have to make it happen, and I was determined that it was suppose a bit of a bucket list thing, really, that I was gonna try and have the attitude that I could die tomorrow with no regrets, and I totally feel like that now. I totally feel that if, you know, I got hit by a bus tomorrow, heaven forbid, but that I would think, wow, I did it. I did what I wanted to do, and that's a really lovely feeling, actually.
Yeah. Now, it's completely the same attitude that I have, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this have, which is all around, you know, am I really living my life now?
Yeah.
And if I'm not really living it, is there a way I can put it together so that I can, in some form, rather than, like you say, waiting until everything is perfectly aligned, by which time, you know, you might not be able to enjoy it. You might not be here, or something else might have happened that means that's not the right time for it. Now's the only moment you know about, so you better go for it now.
And when we first started, I mean, you know, the bits of land we have now, there were other bits which have been and gone. You know, there was a bit by river which, you know, was fantastic and got us out of a hole when we ran out of grazing for a pony we had. and we were there for a few years and loved it, and it was a very kind of communal space, and it was brilliant. But it flooded twice this spring, and we decided to let it go, and we very bravely really decided to ask in the parish news. So we basically put a shout out saying, look, has anybody got a little bit of land that they're not using? And somebody messaged back, and they had this really tiny slither, and it just wasn't for what we needed at that time. And as luck would have it, the people on the parish news team ran it a second month, the advert, without realising, and it was only then that actually the person who saw it, who gave us the main piece of land which our business is now run from, saw it, and which is fantastic. So we've now got a 5-year lease on this piece of land, and it's just changed everything for us. Certainly in terms of the chickens, and sadly in some respects our smallholding is kind of reducing in terms of the larger animals as our chicken business takes over, but certainly in terms of the lifestyle that gives me, it means I'm around to take my children to school. I'm here to pick them up if they're ill. I don't have any worries. If I need to take a day off, for instance, we've got the Rare Breed Survival Trust sale once a year. It's in Bridgewater on Thursday, and I can take the day off. I don't have to ask anyone for the day off. I can go sort the kids out, sort my animals out, and whiz off and go and do that for the day. So the flexibility that I still get from it is fantastic. And we'll still be selling produce. So of course we'll have the eggs, which is great, and certainly I think people underestimate actually how much of an income you can have from eggs, and it's one of those, it sort of trickles along, and then you add it up over and you think, wow, blimey, it's quite considerable. Obviously the apple juice is something we do as well, which has been a huge thing the last 2 years, and it's just growing and growing and being really busy. Obviously the jams and chutneys and pickles, and we're very lucky that where we live we have a lot of through traffic, so a lot of people in the village know to come and get their eggs and bits and pieces from us, and that in itself has given us a lovely little income. The kind of farm gate sales thing.
I mean we spent about £20 yesterday on some eggs and jams, and then we saw you put some pickles out, so we took those as well, and quite a couple of bottles of drinks. And we had the jam. We had one of the jams last night. I think it was the black currant, blackberry and apple.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic, absolutely delicious. So and so we talked about the morning, kids off to school, come back, chickens out, animals watered.
So basically, I mean, when you take an animal and you decide that you're going to care for it, you have complete responsibility. So obviously, that animal's got to be fenced, it's got to be housed. Obviously the sheep, they have a field shelter, they can go in and out as they like. The pigs the same, but the chickens, it's not the same. We have to protect them from predators, so they have to be locked up every night, let out every morning. Obviously all the food and water needs to be sorted. They have to, all their sort of bedding needs to be clean. So generally what I will do is the first hour I literally just whiz around everybody and just make sure they're out, they're free, they've got food and water, and get sort of started for the day. Then quite often I'll come home and do some houseworky type stuff, so the pile next to the dishwasher will be considerable, and get that started. Quite often that's when I'll have breakfast, actually, because it's usually been pretty mad that the whole morning that I've not actually had a chance to do that. Also sort of check emails. So our sort of route to market mostly is through the internet, so through Facebook, through Pre-Loved, various different websites and things, and we get lots of inquiries, so I'll probably deal with all those, and then I'll probably go back out. So if there's a coop that needs cleaning out, or for instance, I don't know, some spraying on some sheep or something that needs doing, I'll go off and do that. Come back, wolf down a bit of lunch, usually a bit more housework, something else tidying up. There's always a heap of washing that needs doing, supermarket run, all these kind of things, all the very boring monotony. And it certainly isn't all making scones and making jam all the time, and it's lovely when it is, and certainly the autumn's my favourite time of year for that, because you do get to do all that kind of foraging and making all the jams and chutneys, but it's really manically busy as well, so it really varies. Your day is never the same. Unfortunately there's all the boring stuff that has to be done over and over again, and cleaning the bathroom and all that kind of thing, but making sure you've got loo roll. Yeah, and it can be as varied as you like, and that's what I like about it, that actually I can think, for instance, somebody's quince tree fell over, and he said, oh, Libby, it just breaks my heart to see all these quinces lying on the ground, and you think, great, quince jelly, so, that's the next project for the next few days. And, Yesterday I had my goddaughter here, so we went and picked a load of plums and made some plum jam, so it's nice. So you do get these idyllic little moments, and I must admit, seeing my goddaughter, her sister and my daughter all frolicking about in the orchard yesterday was lovely.
Yeah, oh yeah, sounds great. Now let's talk for a minute about poo.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
let's.
because I'm pretty au fait with poo.
Yeah.
I grew up with poo on my shoes,
Yeah.
from having all the animals. But it is the sort, and you just mentioned about some of the jobs that require doing around the place. I wonder if people realise just how mucky it can be. I mean, I remember my mum always had some sort of poo on her face from where she'd wiped her brow or something, and a piece of straw. That's the way she looked the whole time I was growing up. Do you think people... I don't want to specifically talk about the poo side, but do you think that people understand the hard work bit and the getting your hands dirty bit when they picture that lifestyle?
I don't think they do, actually. Your wardrobe becomes very... you look like you were just sort of dressed by Mountain Warehouse, to be honest, when you've been doing this for a while. So sort of leggings a de rigueur, really, and a fleecy jumper, a lot of T-shirts, and everything has holes and stains that nobody can really remember what they are. You have a random selection of wellies for every different temperature. Likewise, a good selection of jackets and gloves. You never realise how many different gloves you needed. But it certainly can be really hard work sometimes. Obviously we've had a stonkingly hot summer, which has been brilliant. Would have been more brilliant if I could have spent the whole time in a paddling pool, but actually you have to go out. The water needs of your animals is greater. We did try and grow a lot of our own fruit and vegetables this year, which was really tough with the lack of water. So just managing water when it's hot and actually just working in that heat can be really hard work. We had the new field we've taken on is covered in thistles. And if you're trying to do everything sort of as organically as you can, then that involves a lot more toil. It's certainly a lot easier to be spraying things, but that's the way it is. And the winter is long and it's cold and it's wet, and certainly I've got a very grumpy picture of myself on Facebook having trudged the mile from our house, which doesn't sound a lot a mile, but trust me, a mile in the snow when you can't then take the car out and you're having to pull a trolley of water because you've got no water that's not frozen down at the field is hard work. And basically by the time I trudged that mile, let the ducks out, fed them, gave them this water, which obviously was the only water we had which didn't have ice covering it, and the mile back, that took me from the morning until lunchtime. So yeah, when the weather is pretty bad, it's bad, and actually it doesn't really matter how ill you are or how crap the weather is, whether it's really hot or really cold, you do have to go and do it. You've taken responsibility for these animals, and it is every single day, and I think that can be difficult. It's really like having extra kids, it's that sort of level of commitment. There are some people, however, who do get a break and they get farm sitters in, and you can get farm sitters. So, but there is a cost attached to that, and I have to say we went away for the first time in about 6 years at Christmas. We went to Scotland for Christmas, and after about 5 days I literally wept because I was missing my animals so much. So yeah, it's possible, but I have to say, when you live the lifestyle that you have, sometimes you don't actually want to go away, because you have to try and find somewhere that's more beautiful, more lovely than what you're doing at the moment, and that can be hard.
Yeah. So tell me then about, you touched on it there, but obviously there are tough times and moments where you think it's not working or it's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Were there any moments where you've had regrets or you've thought this just isn't working this way?
Oh, so many, and sometimes. But what I would always say is, yes, bad thing might have happened, but it's a lesson, and you have to just pick yourself and dust yourself off. We bought some chickens from somebody. This is many years ago, probably about 8 years ago now. And they had a disease called Mycoplasma gallisepticum. It infected our entire flock, and we had to cull about 60 birds, and it broke my heart. And at that point I said, I'm never selling chickens again. And in fact, we did take a year off of selling hens because we wanted to make sure everything was totally decontaminated. And then I think at that time we decided we weren't going to be selling chickens anymore. But then you learnt your lesson and you come back. And certainly for me, buying poultry from auction has never ended brilliantly. So a good lesson. Sheep are difficult. Sheep look so easy. They just look like clouds in a field. But my God, they're so tricky. So many things can go wrong with sheep.
They have a death wish, I think.
They do, yeah. So electric fencing and sheep, I've never managed to get to work very well. And I think it's easy sometimes as a smallholder to take a few shortcuts and think, oh, that will be okay. And it generally isn't. So, sheep can be tough. And certainly when we bottle reared the sheep, the outcomes for those sheep is generally bad anyway. These are sheep where the mum's had more babies than she can cope with. The farmer will take the weakest one and sell it. And probably only half of those made it to adulthood. And actually, when that's your first experience of keeping sheep, it's really disheartening. But I suppose you just have to learn your lessons and move on, really. It's tempting to want to give up and to think I'm no good at this. And actually, it's one thing that really frustrates me sometimes about the sort of British Hen Welfare Trust, these kind of things, is that people, as a nation, we're so great and wanting to save animals and love them and nurture them. And I think as a nation, we do it really, really well. But sadly, some people who do adopt these birds end up with birds that really have had a really tough life, and actually with the best care in the world they've never come right, and then they think that they're not very good at keeping hens, and they are. It's just that they had quite tough hens to begin with, and it can be sad sometimes when you hear people have had tough journeys. We did meats, birds, which actually was really successful, but I have to say, for me, taking an animal from alive to dead and then butchering it was more than I felt comfortable with.
Yeah, that for me. So the sheep we would take to the abattoir.
Yeah.
So when they left us, they were alive, and all the big animals we did that. But the poultry, my dad did himself, and then the rest of the afternoon or whatever it was plucking and gutting and dressing. And it was really that made me decide I can't do this. I can't see that beautiful goose twitching still while we're pulling out the feathers. So it's just really tough.
And what people forget about when you're talking about butchering your own livestock, which with poultry it just really isn't cost effective to send it off, is that when you're handling meat from a supermarket, it's been refrigerated and it's cold and it feels very different. If I touch you now, Blair, you're warm because that's you alive. And when you're touching meat that you've bought, it's cold. But obviously when you're touching meat from your livestock, it's still warm when you're doing that, and that feels very weird. And for me, personally, it was just a step too far. And I have to say, I personally didn't enjoy the taste of free-range chicken. I'm so ashamed to say it. I feel awful for saying that.
You'd much rather the stuff that's probably chemical.
I know, I'm a terrible person, but that's just the way it is.
Good.
And it's like with the ham, I have to say, we do eat all our own pork. All our own sausages, but the children, we've never managed to wean them off supermarket ham, and I do feel bad. But and I think actually sort of just accepting what works and what doesn't. I'm amazing at growing courgettes, and I own that. That's brilliant. I'm absolutely rubbish at tomatoes, and I'd love to be great at growing tomatoes, but it's just not my thing. And sometimes. It's not about giving up. There's so many aspects of smallholding, so many, and there's bees, and there's obviously everything you can do with fleeces. I mean, and weaving and knitting and all these sorts of things, and some things you just find you have a natural ability at, and some things you don't. And while I'm sort of saying never give up, I'm also saying try lots of things. And certainly in our first year, when we had a smallholding, we did turkeys, we did ducks, we did meat chickens, we did laying chickens, we did sheep, we did pigs, we had a pony, we had little goats. We tried everything, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, and then finding what works for you.
So the plan is that about 3 weeks from now we move into our place. It seems to me like the most important thing. I've read all the smallholding magazines underneath the bunk bed.
Oh, yes.
In the Airbnb. I read them all. And it seems like fencing is the most important thing.
Yes. Oh my God, fencing. Good fencing makes good neighbours. It's so true. Fencing is important for so many reasons. It keeps your animals where you want them to be and other animals out. And certainly with chickens, you've kind of got both those things going on. So I need my chickens to be pretty much where I left them, and I need Mr. Fox and Mr. Badger to leave them well alone. So yes, you need. It's well worth having good long chats with people about fencing and about what kind of thing you need. I've never ever regretted the money I've spent on proper stock fencing. It's just been a lifesaver. And for instance, we've got some pigs up at the new fields that we've got at the moment. We spent over £1,000 stock fencing that this year, which was really hard at the time. You know, you can't eat fencing, you know, it's not particularly attractive or anything, but it's hard to see the benefit of that £1,000. You also can't take it with you when you move, you know, it seems kind of lost money, but when the pigs escaped from the electric fencing we put them in, but we knew we had this amazing stock fencing, it was such a relief to know that actually they were safe.
Yeah, I think that's going to be our first job. And as you say, it's not the most fun thing.
No.
Ivy wants to just go and get some chickens.
Yeah.
But there's no, I mean, it's right on the edge of the town, and it's just open countryside, and they will be eaten straight away. I mean, they will just go. So, which will be awful for us. Well, it'll be awful anyway for anybody. So yeah, so fencing is number one. Then what?
The absolute number one. I think having a bit of a plan. So sometimes living with the space a little bit. Just kind of seeing what grows where. So for instance, orchards don't work brilliantly well with pigs in my experience. Pigs like to chew trees, but there are certain sheep, for instance, that actually don't eat trees. The Shropshire, for instance, is a breed that doesn't eat trees. So that, for instance, might work quite well. So I think having a bit of a plan of where you want everything to go and being realistic of how much time you have. If you're serious about growing, I think a polytunnel is the best investment you could make. And not only does it give you somewhere very sheltered to grow tomatoes, and I have to say my polytunnel is halfway built now, and I hope to finally master the tomato. But actually, when it's very cold and wet and horrible, it just gives you a real safe haven of kind of being out the house, but still being warm and dry. So I just think a polytunnel would be, personally, my next essential. Yeah. And then I suppose after that... just deciding kind of what animals you want to and getting good stock. Some people choose to buy at auction and find that's very successful. Personally, I really like to buy through people I've met on Facebook. I find it's really good. Pre-loved is also very good. And I like to have a lot of conversations with people about their animals and have quite a chit chat before I commit to buying. And I think it's really important to see what after sales kind of service you get, if you like, and what sort of support. And of course there's the Smallholders Association, so pretty much every county has one, and the advice they can give you and the support they can give you is amazing. It's kind of good having a farmer friend, but I just find the scale and the what they're trying to get out of their animals is a very different thing to smallholders. So so maybe before fencing even, I'd say seriously join a smallholders association.
Actually, I just did. I just joined the Somerset Smallholders Association.
Yeah.
So that's
we're a friendly, crazy bunch, and and it's great because you get lots of access to free courses. We've got a Facebook group which is great, and it's just lovely. You know, you can put funny little pictures of weird things you found on your sheep and go, guys, what's this? What do I do? Or you know, if your chicken's got a strange lump somewhere, or you know, you want to know things about abattoirs or why your tomatoes aren't growing, all sort of things. It's just so lovely to have that community of people, and there's the wider community, particularly on social media, which is really, really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, when I was growing up, of course, there was no internet. I can't imagine what difference that would have made to my mum to have access to that community and to be able to ask those kind of questions.
And the other thing is that smallholding can be quite isolating, actually, because you're living and working in your own bubble. And sometimes you get to the feed store and you're just desperate for a conversation with somebody.
Someone talk to me.
Yeah, it can get a bit mad sometimes. Interestingly, we had somebody come and volunteer for us, and she also had the plan that she wanted to have a smallholding, and she was from London, very sociable lady, and she was lovely. And I said, well, I'd just really love to have the smallholding all in one place, because then I wouldn't have all this driving around and faffing about. She said, Libby, if you did that, you realise you wouldn't see anybody, don't you? And I was like, oh my God, yeah. She said, seriously, you must have said hello to 20 people while we've been traipsing around today. And I was like, yeah. She said, you'd really miss that. And I thought, it's so true. And I think that's possibly one disadvantage of having the land with the house is it can be, sometimes you can just get a little bit in your own zone a bit too much, and that can just, feel a little bit lonely.
Yeah. I mean, there were definitely days. So even after I moved away from home, my parents still had their small holding until quite recently. And so when they went on holiday, I would go and look after it. And there would be, I mean, not just days, maybe a week where I didn't even really leave the property. And you do go a bit mental.
Yeah.
You haven't talked to anyone. It's just you. That's beautiful. I mean, my favourite thing was in the summer, the last time I did it before they moved, and watering the garden in the evening, and, the sort of rainbows that created by the sprinkler and all of that kind of thing. Absolutely fantastic. But I did go a bit mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it was only a week.
You really do. And it's a bit like when you work from home, I think, you can find yourself... a bit socially isolated, particularly, but around here it's great, because obviously we have the box at the end of the drive. That's great. Lots of people stop and chat to us there. We do get to meet lots of customers, which is wonderful as well. But making time to actually have time away from the small holding, and we're lucky we've got a fantastic comedy club which runs once a month, so we do that. And there's various kind of groups and things that we're involved with, and it's really important actually just to have a bit of time away from it all, because you just can get a bit obsessive about it, I think.
Yeah. So if there's just to finish up, I mean, I know from the trip that we've just taken that I cannot be realistic about it before I'm actually there. I'm going to have an idealised, romanticised view. It's just, that's the way it is, and I'm not going to really be able to get my head around what we've undertaken until we're there and I'm having a tough day, and I go, okay, this is what Libby was talking about.
No, the suck it and see is definitely, it's the only way. And I think if somebody who's already lived, been brought up in a small holding feels...
But it was a long time ago, and I was a child, and so again, my mum took care of a lot of stuff that I didn't really have to take responsibility for. Yeah.
It's almost the I wouldn't say the best and the worst journey. It's probably the best journey I've ever taken. It's the journey that's taught me the most. What I love about it is I'm constantly surrounded by like-minded people. So the people who stay with us in the holiday let. It's very, very rare that I meet somebody who I don't feel that we have something in common with. The people the customers you meet through the chickens, the people who we sell products to, are all people who you feel you have something in common with, and who are very passionate about the same thing. And it's really lovely. And sometimes I think when people feel the world is such a hopeless place and it's all going so horribly wrong, it's certainly not my experience. It's my experience is that people do care. People love animals. People are taking more responsibility for their water usage, where their food comes from, not using chemicals, food miles, all these kind of things. I just see personally it getting better and better. And whether the small holding world kind of informs, bigger schemes and bigger farming, who knows? But I think the future's really bright. I really do. And that's not to say that we won't make lots more mistakes and try lots more things and get it all wrong again. But I'm very positive that our small holding journey is still very much in its infancy, and there'll be lots more chapters to go.
Thank you so much. This has been so helpful. Will you stay in touch with me and help me?
Of course I will. Of course I will.
You're my first smallholder friend. I think it's going to be so important.
Yeah, I think the friends that you make, I'm faced now with one of my dearest friends who is a dear friend, but also enormously helpful and practical with the smallholding, possibly moving back to Essex. And I'm just like, no, don't go. Because actually having friends who not only can advise you about stuff, but literally stand and, hold that pig while you're putting an ear tag in, or help you, treat your sheep for fly strike and all these sorts of things, sort of run around chasing goats around a field. Those friends are really important, actually. You do need those practical ones.
Good. Well, I've got your number.
Yeah.
It's all right.
You can go, help.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely talking to you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good luck.
Oh, it started feeling very real about halfway during that interview for me, but as I said, it's impossible for me not to have a romantic view at this stage. This is the point, as you're standing on the threshold for adventure, where everything just feels like it's going to be wonderful and beautiful, and there's nothing that anyone can say to you about the realities that really makes you feel any other way. So there we go, the rubber will hit the road in a few weeks' time, I'm sure. You can find out more about Libby and her chickens at Ham Street Hens on Facebook. The link is in the show notes. Do check her page out. And if you're in the market for chickens, I can guarantee that these ones have had a great start in life. More big news. We are launching a new online coaching program this week. Yes, it's live. It's happening. The 19th of September. A Brilliant Gamble online goes live. This is a self-paced program of videos and exercises that I've created based on my experiences over the last 6 months and, of course, the last 20 years, that takes you through all the steps from deciding what your Brilliant Gamble is going to be, what is the life that you want, to working out how to make it happen, how all the different pieces of your life are going to fit together, to taking the action steps. There's a lot of personal development in the program as well. That's actually the most important bit, really. There's the practical things, the roadmap and the taking of the actions, but really it's the work on needs, values, flow versus force, hero's journey, principles and practices, and dealing with all that inner chit-chat that's the most important stuff. And that's the stuff that I learnt on the road. I'm so happy to be able to bring it to you right now. So if you're listening to this before launch, you can register interest now. And if you're listening after launch, you can sign up. We've been testing out these materials for the last few months and the feedback has been exceptional. I've really been blown away by the stories that people have been sharing with me about what they've got from the videos and doing the exercises and how their life is changing. So I'm very confident that this can help you turn your dreams from something you talk about and think about to something you actually do. So go to abrilliantgamble.com and click on the classes and coaching page and all the information is there. I'm so excited to share this with you and I can't wait to start hearing about what you've been doing in your own life and how things are changing for you as a result of taking this opportunity and signing up to the program. You can stay in touch with us at A Brilliant Gamble via Instagram and Twitter at Brilliant Gamble. You can go to the website, you can drop us a line on email. Please do stay in touch. And if you're thinking maybe now's the time for me to start making some changes, then please do go and check out that Brilliant Gamble online program. This could be the moment for you. Back again next week from Ireland, but in the meantime, with all the information about how to get in touch with us, here's the lovely and very well-travelled Ivy Palmer.
We'd love to hear from you. You can get all the episodes of this show, plus read the blog and find out more about our travel adventure at www.brilliantgamble.com. Sign up to the newsletter and get an advance notice of the classes and programs Mummy is running. Plus, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Brilliant Gamble. Finally, please leave a review and star rating for this podcast on iTunes, as it helps people find us and take a brilliant gamble of their own. Bye!